and welcome back to Art with Anna. Today we are going to talk about a type of art called collage. Now I think most of us know what collage means, but in case you don't, it's when you take found pictures, oftentimes from different magazines or books, even old photographs, and you cut them up, cut up paper, and you combine them in different combinations. So, something cool about collage is it's kind of a quick way of making art. It's really just cutting out images and pasting or tacking them together in a combination that you like. So, a lot of us have done this in school, but it isn't necessarily something that you do only in school. In fact, there's quite a few fine artists who use collage as a practice. Even Henri Matisse, right? He was a collage artist as well, putting his paper cutouts in different patterns until he found one that he liked. So we are going to talk a little bit about collage today, and we're going to focus on two different artists. Each artist we will do one project for in this video. So let's talk about our first artist. Her name is Johanna Goodman. She is from New York. She's a practicing artist right now. And she has a wonderful gift for collage. But before we get into making her art or talking even more about her, we first need to talk about what supplies we need. You will need a landscape of your choosing, a portrait of a woman, a pair of feet, a pair of hands, a few types of scrapbooking paper or paper with different patterns, a glue stick, and a pair of scissors, some watercolor paint, and a cup of water for cleaning off your paintbrush. Okay, now that we've gathered all of our supplies, we can now look at some of the artworks of Johanna Goodman. So she is an illustrator first. She was New York based. She lives in New York, the state. And she kind of moved into collage more recently. And we're going to be looking specifically at her series called Imaginary Beings. Now there are these figures that are on kind of a landscape or some sort of extravagant background, and then there are these just really large kind of abstract shapes with typically a woman. There's a few males too, head, some arms, and some legs. Now she talked a little bit about this series and was thinking about how a lot of her cutouts come from magazines. And growing up, she would look at magazines and look at the fashion magazines, and she'd see these really slender and small women in all the clothing, and she was saying with this artwork she likes the idea of the juxtaposition of making these women larger than life. So you can kind of see in these artworks that compared to the background, the women are huge, right? These figures are giant, and typically there's a lot of symbolism in this art. So typically whatever the figure is made out of kind of coincides with the backdrop. So I think these pieces of art are just fun to look at. I think they're really bold. I think it's fun to think about the symbolism between what the woman is wearing in the background, and to just enjoy these kind of fun pieces of artwork. So we're going to make one of these today. So the first thing we are going to need is to grab out whatever landscape you want. I think I'll choose the mountain one, but you can pick whatever landscape you'd like. And let's take out our watercolors and we will start just watercoloring however you'd like your landscape. All right, so here we have a mountain landscape. It's just the one that I chose to paint. It's all painted, and we are now going to make our figure. But the first things we're going to need to figure out are what types of paper, patterned paper, we're going to want to use to make our figure. You can use just one sheet of paper. You can use a few sheets of paper to be combined. I think I will use a few. I was kind of thinking of the phrase mountain majesty, so I think I'm going with mountains and then majesty meaning like golds and rich colors like this. And you can kind of cut out these shapes however you'd like, and we'll collage them together to kind of make the form that our head, arms, and feet will kind of attach to. All right, so I've used these two papers and just kind of cut out blob shapes. We want it to take up most of the piece of paper, but we do need room for the legs and the head. So let's pick those out now. So you'll see a few sheets out in front of you. One of these sheets looks like this, and it is a bunch of just different women. You'll choose which one you want, and we will cut out the head and put that toward the top of our figure. And then we have also arms and hands. It's good if the proportions of your body don't match up. So if the head was really small and the arms are really big, we also have some legs to choose from. That's a good thing. Something that was kind of fun that Johanna really worked on was just playing with different proportions, making up the proportions as she went. So I am going to pick out a head of one of the women and cut that out and add it to the top. All right, so I am choosing this Native American woman. I have her head there. And I'm going to choose some feet taking a step for down here. And then arms. And we're going to have them coming out of each side. Or maybe I'll do them like this. Maybe she's kind of over there with both hands making the shape. But I can play around with it. I could also have her doing this. Could have her hands going straight down like that. So play around with what you have, and then feel free to start to glue down. All right, so here I have my imaginary bean. She's kind of glittery, so it might be hard to see, but her feet are down here. Her hands are kind of doing something off to the side, and she's looking off that way. I think it looks a little like she's dancing, which I like. But again, this series is called Imaginary Beans, so these beans are imaginary. They're just kind of fun and meant to be played around with, but also if you're hoping to put meaning to it, some symbolism, you can do that too. But this is our first project. All right, let's switch gears to a different collage artist who uses some similar elements, but we will need a few different supplies, so let's gather those. All right, so next we are going to learn about artist Naomi Vona. She is an Italian artist that's actually based in London, and she is also taking images, older images, and making them into collages. We are, though, going to focus on only one of her series today. She has a lot of different series of different types of collages, and the one today is called the Montgolfier series. Now, that name is French, and it might mean nothing to you, but the Montgolfier brothers are the inventors of the hot air balloon. So when we look at her art, they were kind of from the Victorian period. She chooses images of that time period, so people who are kind of from the same time period as the invention of the hot air balloon. And then she kind of gives these blob shapes, kind of like balloons, around the pictures of the subject. So that is what we are recreating today. But as always, let's grab out our supplies and then we'll get started. You will need a Victorian era portrait, construction paper, scissors, a glue stick, paint, and some Q-tips. You'll also need a white sheet of paper. So you might think that Naomi's art is similar to Johanna's, and you'd be right in some ways. So they're similar in the way that there is a small head of a portrait, right, on kind of a bulbous form. That is true. But I think one of the main differences, and probably the most important one, is looking at the background. in Johanna's artwork, the background was equally a part of the piece of art, and in fact, it gave us reference for the size of the figure. So when thinking about that, the figures were giant, right? They were these really, really big women kind of taking over all the space, taller than the mountains in the background of my photo, really, really big beings. For Naomi's art, there is no background, and actually that is very intentional. She was kind of hoping that these old images, given this balloon shape, could kind of feel like they were floating, and floating throughout infinite space and time. So it could feel like they were in from any time period, right? The bubbles are a little more modern when the portraits are a little, they're older. But also it doesn't give us any reference for size, and I think that that's something she really liked. So this could be a really, really small person on a little bubble floating around, or it could be like a hot air balloon, right, and be giant. And we don't know because we don't have any source for reference. So we are going to start with just a plain white sheet of paper. I'm going to use this one. It's leftover fire hydrant from one of our previous artworks, and just reuse the back. And the first thing we're going to do is we need to make our hot air balloons. We need to be like the Montgolfier brothers, right, and invent our own hot air balloons. So I would say you're going to want to cut out 3 to 4 round shapes out of your construction paper. So I am just going to do just that. Just going to stick mine on top of each other, cut out a round shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it small enough so 3 or 4 can fit on your piece of paper. I've got these. I'm going to choose to make one smaller, because why not? It's our artwork. You can make them all the same size, or you can make them different sizes. So now that I have my 3 pieces of, well, my 3 hot air balloons, right, I'm just going to take a little extra from my cardboard paper to use as a palette, and I'm going to take my colors of paint, and I'm going to choose just one color of paint to go on one hot air balloon. And then I am going to choose a Q-tip as my painting utensil for today. So on a lot of these images, they're kind of modern geometric patterns on the balloons. So it's either a series of dots everywhere, so it's kind of nice. With this Q-tip, you can really make dots quite easily by going like that. And there were also some lines, so we can do the same thing with our Q-tip. All right, so I have one hot air balloon. I'm going to repeat the same steps with the other 2. Just make my own patterns with dots and lines on these 2 as well. All right, so now we get to choose how we want to arrange them, right? They're kind of floating. So they're kind of like bubbles where they kind of overlap a little bit. So you can kind of play around with where you want and how you want your bubbles to sit. But you could do something crazy like that. Just play around with it. How do you want your bubbles to be? And then when you find a configuration you like, grab out your glue and we'll glue it down. All right, so our last step is to pick out which one of the portraits we would like, and then figure out where on our hot air balloon we want to place their head. All right, so I've chosen this guy because I like his collar and I like his mustache. But choose whoever you'd like. And I'm just gonna put some glue on the back of his head and kind of decide where I want him to go. Again, he's gonna pop out right there. All right, and just like that, we have a Naomi Vona style collage piece of artwork. We got this little guy who could be floating through space and time in an imaginary world, right? Much like our other artist. Just exploring, using different pieces from different areas, combining them together to make one piece of art. So I thought that was very fun. Thanks for joining me today, guys, and making art with me, and I'll see you again next week.